There are three little stories that put together perhaps can make a tripod on which we can rest the answer to a question. The first is that story about the samurai swordsman whose lord had died on the battlefield, so he became a rogue, and he gathered around him a motley group of other swordsmen who had also lost their lords. And they raped and pillaged through the villages and the towns of the countryside. Now, as was the way of it, messages were sent ahead to the towns and villages to say that the rogue samurai and his marauders were on their way. So all the townspeople would run for the hills to hide. But on an occasion, the rogue samurai and his bunch arrived at a certain village, and it appeared to be deserted. But the rogue samurai sent one of his members ahead to check if there was anyone still remaining before they burned the village down. And the messenger came back and said, "Oh, there's just an old monk sitting up there in the hut." So, gathering himself together, the rogue samurai marched up to the hut and entered where the old monk was sitting cross-legged in meditation. The rogue samurai took out his sword and placed it at the throat of the old monk and said, "Don't you know that I can run you through without blinking an eye?" And the old monk looked up at the rogue samurai benignly and said, "And don't you know that I can be run through without blinking an eye?" The rogue samurai put his sword back in its sheath, bowed to the old monk, and left, gathering his marauders together and leaving the town. The second story is about a young acolyte who was in a school that happened to be a school run by a master who not only taught the way of the sword, but was also an accomplished Zen master and taught the ways of Zen as well as the art of swordsmanship. So this young acolyte came to the master and said, "Master, tell me, what is the ethos of our school?" And the master scolded him and said, "You've been attending this academy for so many years and you still don't know what we're about? Go to the temple and meditate, and don't come back until you have the answer." So the acolyte went off to the temple, and he meditated for 7 days and 7 nights, and he did not receive an answer. So being totally dejected, he left the temple. But as he was leaving, he was inspired to look back at that which rested over the gate of the temple entrance. It was but one word. And when the acolyte went back to the master merely smiled at him and nodded The third story is a story about a gladiator, a fierce gladiator. He was an orphan from an early age and made a slave, but then he made his way up the ranks of gladiators until he became renowned through all of the land. But one day, this gladiator was on his way to another tournament when he came to a rope bridge that crossed a river. And as it happened, just as the gladiator was crossing the bridge, only wide enough for one person, coming the other way was an old monk. They met in the middle of the bridge, and the gladiator, posturing, said, "Get out of my way." But the monk did not cede. He did not move, even though he was of a diminutive size, half the size of the big, brawny gladiator. The gladiator got angry and took out his sword, waving it at the monk, and said, "I can chop you into little pieces and throw you into the river." But the monk stood stalwart where he was standing, and suddenly the gladiator looked into the eyes of the old monk, and he was taken aback, and he said to the old monk, "Why do you not fear me?" The old monk gave him an answer, after which the gladiator said, "All of my life I have had fear and used fear. I want what you have." So taking off his armor plate, his sword belt, he threw them in the river and followed the old monk. In due time, he became a great master, teacher. So the question that arises, that we might rest on this tripod, what was the sign that was over the outside of the temple? And what was it that the old monk answered to the samurai, the gladiator, when he said, "Why do you not fear me?" What is it that we have emblazoned on our forehead as we meet life now? What is the answer that we would give to the question, why do you not fear me? Whatever it is in life that presents itself. What is that word over the temple gate? That which is emblazoned on our forehead as we face life. A word.
Love.
Okay. What does that embody as we face life now? Presuming that you're saying that this love is not an emanating force. We're not beaming it out. It's just written. Makes us a non-combatant in life, doesn't it? This word, love. But what are these stories telling us? What was the answer to the old monk gave to the gladiator? Why don't you fear? Make these stories a tripod on which we might rest our answer. Perhaps that answer will bring a realization.
Well, I think they all had the freedom of not having, where they were then in life, they had courage, they had more fear, they didn't fear anything. So what is that? Then it has to go back to having courage and freedom.
Yes?
Does it not come back to like somewhere the monk doesn't have, like he's let go of everything? So if you have a need or it generates a fear, the fear that that need will not be fulfilled. So once you get to a place where you have no need for life to be or not be, or this to be or that to be or not be, then you're naturally fearless, because whatever is okay. Whether it be, getting your head chopped off or, just, or anything else, it just really doesn't make any more difference somehow.
So we look back on our life, and haven't we all been samurais and gladiators? Haven't we had to learn street smarts and get up when we've been pushed down to our knees and with our bellies on the floor?
It's still happening everywhere.
Yes.
amongst our own people. A lot of gladiators still around.
The reaction is still there. So what is it we can recognize that's emblazoned? The Tao is called love. A love that's not any emanating force.
Acceptance
Of life?
of everything.
But isn't that, wouldn't you say that's like capitulation? Oh, this is the way life is, I've just got to take the way it is? No. We're trained gladiators. We're trained samurai. We're not going to let go of that, are we? It's part of us,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't our mojo that's there?
Yeah. So it's a oneness that, so they look at it like they're not separate from that person, so therefore,
Maybe. How is it for you?
well, sometimes I get like that.
Is it because they have faith? It's faith, they've got faith in, I don't know, themselves or life or...
I think the gladiators are the fearful ones. They react out of fear. Some kind of fear, not to dominate, whatever fear they have in them. They just need to dominate.
Okay,
They
so
just need to let go.
we became gladiators and samurais because we were driven by fear of loss or fear of not getting blah, 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 blah. But where are we now?
Knowing?
Knowing? Yes, that of course comes with the territory.
Yeah, it's a state of non-resistance now.
Yes,
A state of acceptance.
acceptance and non-resistance are there as part of it, but what's the word that's emblazoned?
Gracious?
In a word?
Gracious.
Yes.
The awareness.
The word passion comes to mind.
Okay. Passion is there, isn't it?